Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. We have survived the international break, and depending how you have viewed this season, that might not necessarily be a good thing this time. However, Celtic return tomorrow, and in preparation we're going to talk about a few things this afternoon in relation to that game. Martin O'Neill's press conference yesterday, of course. We have a huge game at Dens Park in the city of Dundee, which hasn't been kind to us this year. It's do or die for Celtic tomorrow, and we're going to cover that. So let's get into the video, I suppose. If you haven't already, please make sure to hit like and subscribe. It would be much appreciated. Thank you all for your patience throughout this international break. I know it's been a little bit quieter than usual here on the Ryan 118 channel, but we should be back into the swing of things starting today and of course tomorrow with the post-match reaction, etc. It's a huge weekend for Celtic, simply put, and after the results in the Scottish Premiership today, that point has been drilled through furthermore. So let's talk about a few things. Let's start with Martin O'Neill's press conference yesterday, and something really interesting that came up at that in regards to his future at the club. So as we know, Celtic will have a new manager next season. Martin O'Neill has effectively confirmed he has no interest in taking the job beyond this season. And I don't think many Celtic fans are necessarily keen on the idea either, because we need to move forward. And that's nothing against Martin O'Neill. I've made it clear I love the guy. I want statues built of him and everything else. But I think for the sake of the football club and for the sake of the future of the football club, we need to be moving forward. We need to be thinking into, modernising and whatnot. And Martin O'Neill being the full-time permanent coach for another year doesn't necessarily align with that. Martin O'Neill knows that himself, and I'm pretty sure he wouldn't be offended by any Celtic fans saying that. However, at his press conference yesterday, he made some interesting comments about his future, which indicates his time at the club might not be coming to an end when the season is all over and done with. If Celtic were to win the league, not win the league, win the Scottish Cup, not win the Scottish Cup, Martin O'Neill might still be involved with the club in some capacity next year, and it's something that I've spoke about a couple of times in the channel. I think we've covered it in a couple of the live Q&A sessions. I'm absolutely for the idea of it. I'm not against it whatsoever. I think that Martin O'Neill's involvement with the club in some advisory role could be good, and he spoke about that yesterday at the press conference. So if we have a quick look and a switch over to what he said, these were the kind of headlines that you might have already seen over the past 24 hours since the conclusion of that press conference, and I think it's important that we cover that Martin O'Neill is apparently to hold talks with Dermot Desmond and the Celtic board over his future and Celtic's long-term strategy. He said he's going to meet with Michael Nicholson and Dermot Desmond to outline some ideas, and talks about what he would like if he was a young manager at the stage of his career coming to, at a different stage of his career, coming to Celtic. Now, I think there will be a kind of split opinion on this, especially because of his relationship with Dermot Desmond. But right now, I think Celtic need football-minded people around the club. And Martin O'Neill is as football-minded as you can get, one of the most experienced heads in the game. And I don't think that him being involved in the club in some sort of role next year is necessarily a bad thing. We'll come back to that in a moment. Let's just go over his comments and see what he's actually been saying. So if we look at his actual comments in relation to all of this, he said he will speak to Michael and Dermot at some stage. I think generally we all feel the same about what we need to do to get us back on top. But let's say a new manager was coming in and I'm in the club as an advisor to the board. If I were the new manager, I wouldn't mind who was on the board as long as there was a committee for signing players and as long as the manager would have the final say. There has to be affordability, but if the manager has the final say, then it could work. I also believe the manager coming in would be hoping that someone, maybe an old figure like me, would be on his side. If I were stepping in now as a 45-year-old manager, those are the things that I would like. So, he wants to maybe be a guiding figure for someone. Maybe not so much a guiding figure, that's not the phrase that I would use, but kind of like an overseer at the club that maybe other managers haven't had when they've had to stand toe-to-toe with a very, very shrewd and inept Celtic board. He's obviously coming out and calling them inept, but I think you can read between the lines here. He's basically alluding to the fact that managers such as Brendan Rodgers have had to deal with the signings of the Celtic board without there being someone maybe as acting as a middleman, and Martin O'Neill suggesting being that middleman. So he does go on to talk about it a little bit more in terms of recruitment and trying to unify the club, but basically saying that, if there's an idea of bringing him in, it's something that he's not against exploring. So, as I said, I think there will be a sort of split opinion to all of that, but it is interesting to hear him come out and say it. I don't want to drag this on because it might amount to nothing, and it might just be something that Martin O'Neill suggests and we never see acted upon. You know, the kind of the same way as we heard about Fergal Harkin all of those years ago. There's a blast from the past for you. But remember, we heard about Fergal Harkin and apparently him becoming the new director of football, whatever it was at Celtic, and it led to nothing. So there's maybe no point in getting too bogged down by it. But I want to come back to something that I said when Martin O'Neill returned to the club. And before, just right before he returned to the club, amongst the Wilfred Nancy saga, and I think it was around this time I was saying it. I just feel like that Celtic at the highest level are lacking football-minded people, and we're a club that has been run by lawyers and accountants for the longest time, and you know the results of that are being shown to us first-hand at the minute. You know, the reason that where we are right now is because we've let lawyers and accountants make footballing decisions for far too long. Brendan Rodgers basically confirmed that a lot of the signings that we made in the summer, if not the majority of the signings that were made in the summer, were board signings. But who on that board is well versed enough in the sport, in football, to be making these decisions? And I know that they'll point to the recruitment team. I know they will have pointed to Paul Tisdale, for example. You know, a lot of these people are still very much unproven when it comes to the game at this level. Martin O'Neill isn't. Martin O'Neill has proven himself over the course of 30, 40 years at the highest level. And I would much rather his opinion at that level of the board as an advisor than anybody who's been here over these last few years, the likes of your Tisdales, your Lawwells, and I'm talking about Mark and Peter, by the way, your Hammonds and your, these other your recruitment specialists. I don't think he needs to necessarily have this major role where he's very hands-on and pulling the strings behind the scenes. But at least if he's somebody that's there to act somewhat as a director of common sense when it comes to football, I'm all for it. And that's so we can stop these accountants and lawyers making decisions that are apparently the best for the club, because they're not the best for the club. So, you know, I remember back in January or so saying, if Martin O'Neill was involved next year somewhat as a, maybe not so much a director of football, because that is very, very hands-on, but something similar to that, I'm all for it. Just because I trust Martin O'Neill and I trust his opinions of the game. And look, you can argue about his age, you can argue about whether that's still dwelling in the past. Until we know that we have this modern-minded, forward-thinking guy at that role that is equipped for Celtic, there's probably no many better options than Martin O'Neill, and that's just me being honest about it. I think for me, if I was just to put it in black and white and to make it as simple to understand as possible here, it's just I want, first and foremost, a top quality coach / manager to be through the door, ready to go as soon as this season's over, and I want him to get his way at Celtic. And if Martin O'Neill being in a role at that boardroom level or above the manager helps him get his way, then I'm all for it. You know, if they are two people who could be in communication, new manager and Martin O'Neill, and this manager can turn to him and say, this is what I think we need to do, blah, blah, blah. And Martin O'Neill was there to put the words in the ear of Desmond, Lawwell, Nicholson, whoever it is. I'm all for it. I really am. I think there will be a lot of, there will be definitely a lot of people who are very sceptical of that because, the Desmond relationship. But in terms of being realistic and rather than pie in the sky, I think it might be the best you're going to get in terms of, the short-term future of the club. Long-term, I mean, I'd like to hope that this current board are gone and we don't see them again, the ownership group changes and whatever, but that's a long, long way away. So in terms of short-term, I think it's as best as you can get for as realistic as you can be. So we'll wait and see if it amounts to anything. I think there's a lot more to say in the matter and a lot more discussion that I could have with other people about this, probably some pushback and some conversation / debate. But yeah, Martin O'Neill could be at the club in some capacity next year. Definitely not as manager. I think this also confirms the fact that he will not be manager of the club next year. But that's not news. That's something that we all should have acknowledged by now. Anyway, let's go through the rest of the press conference, shall we? Alistair Johnston, yes, we have to talk about it. You all know by now, if you've been under a rock, you might be finding out for the first time he's suffered a fresh setback towards his recovery and returning to the first team for Celtic. Now, before the international break, we'd done a video on this. He came out and said himself that he would like to be back for the split fixtures commencing. Didn't want to put any pressure on that, but that was the date he was aiming for. It looks like it won't be the case anymore. It will not be the split fixtures. we might still see him before the end of the season, but it won't be as early as match day 34. And this is why, because at the press conference yesterday, Martin O'Neill confirmed that Alistair has had a bit of a setback. He went away with the Canadian national side, done some running, and had a bit of a setback on his final day of training, which was really disconcerting for us. In the wider scheme of things, for the length of time he's been out, hopefully it's not too bad, but it has delayed things a little bit. We were hoping to give him a couple of weeks, maybe have him playing some bounce games, but we'll just have to put that to the side for a moment, which is a shame. So a very disappointing piece of news, considering the right back situation as well right now. Donovan isn't fully fit as far as I'm aware. Johnston now being injured and Araujo being injured means you're left with Tony Ralston, which of course is a bit concerning. I think there's a lot of questions that have popped up from this, and I've seen people discussing it on Twitter and such. Why was he allowed to start training with Canada before he was allowed to train with Celtic and all that jazz? It's just another one of these questions that adds into the lunacy of our season, I think. I'd imagine that Celtic did greenlight it. The fact that he was, away with them in the first place would give you all the kind of confirmation you need that they'd greenlight. They give it the green light. But it is still frustrating, really frustrating. So, these things happen. As I said on my live stream, I think it was on Monday. I don't have any tinfoil hats on or anything. I just think Celtic's luck with injuries this year has been pretty bad, and this is just reiterating that point. So, Johnston out for a further length of time. Hopefully it's not too long, but I've not got my hopes up. I've just kind of accepted it. As I said the other day, I'm numb to all of this by now, so it doesn't affect me as much as it should. However, if you want to try and draw some positives from this injury-ridden season, and albeit a very small positive, we got quite a positive one on a positive update on Jota at this press conference as well. After rumours started circulating that he might be done, that his injury was more severe than initially feared. I did talk about that on one of the streams, saying just be careful what you read online and through the WhatsApp channels and whatnot. I hadn't heard anything myself that indicated that Jota's career was in a dangerous position that was threatening or anything like that. But Martin O'Neill has confirmed that they should have him back for pre-season, and if I just bring this up on screen for you again now, Martin O'Neill did say he doesn't see anything as a career-threatening injury. Fans were worried about the length of time it's taken, but I can try and assure them that he will recover from this. So they're expecting him back. Well, he said he's hoping that he's back for pre-season. He has no concerns whatsoever in terms of it being a career-threatening injury. So yeah, you can kind of put that to the side for now. As I said, it's a very minor positive because he's not back this season, so it doesn't really impact us at this moment in time. But in terms of those who were maybe worried that Jota was never going to be seen again, calm down, he'll be okay. So it's on to Dundee tomorrow. I will be live on the channel before kick-off. As usual, an hour before kick-off, we'll review the starting 11s and talk about our thoughts heading into that game. Still very much a do-or-die weekend for Celtic, and I know I get it, it's very tedious at this point saying that time and time again. It feels like every week has been winner, you're out. But this weekend, and even Martin O'Neill said it yesterday, does feel like that. I think if Celtic were to fail to win and Hearts were to go on and win their game in particular against Livingston, we're not in a great position. The league table looks like this heading into the game. Rangers won 4-2 this afternoon. That's why this video is very rushed, and I'm just kind of screen grabbing things because I was waiting until full time to get the lay of the land. As expected, Rangers won their game against Dundee United. 4-2 was the final score, which means we are now 5 points behind both Hearts and Rangers. If Hearts win their game before we kick off tomorrow, that means we would be 8 points behind Hearts. It would be the point of no return if Celtic lost. 8 points behind Hearts, 5 points behind Rangers. You're not going to make up that gap unless a miracle happens between tomorrow and the end of the season. So it's a must win. It's as simple as that. And I know a lot of people live on the mantra of it's not over until it's mathematically over. Listen, I'm not a huge gambler, but I know my money would be on one of the other two to win the league if Celtic lose tomorrow. So we know what we have to do. We know that Celtic need to get the job done, and hopefully they do. And Martin O'Neill, we trust. We need a big recovery. And I know that's hard right now, but we're Celtic. We've done it before and we can do it again. Right then, that does it for today. If you've enjoyed, please make sure to hit like and subscribe. Apologies once again for us being maybe a wee bit rushed today. Back to normality tomorrow. So I'll see you in the live stream, and I'll see you for the post-match reaction. Until then, take care. God bless. See you next time.